to the second of our two Board of Education budget workshops. And before we get started, why don't we all stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so at our last workshop, we made it through, I think, half of the questions, roughly half of the questions. And so we're going to pick up where we left off. I know Mr. Bedancy and his team did some rearranging of the questions to try to group them into categories to make it a little easier.
Yeah, I think, we did the best we could, I think, given the time that we had Tuesday night to get all the information at the 11th hour. And I think when we kind of huddled up the next morning and talked about how we felt the evening went, the conversations were good, but it was a little bit all over the place because we were answering the questions in the order that they came in at. And so they weren't arranged by topic. And so I felt, this was just me personally, that, 1 minute we're talking about solar arrays, 1 minute we're talking about TESOL, and we're just big jumps, from one to the other. So what we did is we arranged all the questions. So it's all the same questions that are on the grid, but we put them into subcategories so that we're kind of talking about the same thing until we move on to the next subcategory versus jumping back and forth across various topics. And the other thing we did with the grid, and you all have a copy, is if it's shaded in gray, like you can see for the first one, that's a question that we already, asked, answered, and discussed on Tuesday evening, just so that everybody can see that, what is still unanswered and needs to be addressed tonight. We also tried to put the corresponding slides for each question linked into the document, so obviously you can't, click on a link on a piece of paper, but if people that are accessing this online, if they want to access the link that corresponds with this question, it is hyperlinked into each question so that it's connected.
And just before you go in, this grid, the questions, all the links are going to be out on our
Tomorrow morning.
Board of Education website for
Yes.
anybody that's interested from the public to get in there and see it.
And as of right now, the proposed budget is up there as well as my presentation. Okay, so sliding down. So the first question, and the category here is staffing, we received is, where is the elementary teacher required and how does it affect class size? So one of the things we do every year is we look at the current sections and the enrollment and the grade levels. We do what we call a roll forward, so to next year. And in some instances, if there's, let's say I'll use fourth grade as an example, if there's 2 sections of fourth grade right now at Strong and there's 3 sections of third grade, given that the class size is still 24, you need to add a section of fourth grade next year, if all things being equal, assuming that they still need 3 sections of third grade, depending on the grade 2 class sizes. So we roll everything forward. And basically, as long as the numbers stay within the guidelines, we don't need to add sections. And we've actually, in the past few years, been able to reduce and consolidate sections by using the guidelines. And that actually helped us with the hiring of the health teachers this year, the PE and health teachers. So this is a year, while last year it gave us some FTEs, this year it's asking for an FTE. Energy. Can we look at the electricity part of the increase request? There was no savings with changes to public benefits changes. I'll let Mrs. Mellett answer this.
The public benefit charge increased on our invoices in June of '24, and then in September of '25, it came back down. So in the 24-25 school year, it impacted us more heavily than it will this year. The way we finished our energy or electricity budget in the 25 year, we were at a shortfall of 63,000. So that's the increase that you're seeing in the new year is partially related to regulating up from last year and then realizing that our electricity usage is variable and it's always increasing. So they recommend like a 3 to 5% increase, even though we're locked in on the supply, but the usage usually goes up. So that's the reason why we're looking for, I think it's a 4.5% increase on the electricity line.
Health insurance. Can we take a percentage off of the estimated insurance increase due to updated information? So this one is pretty straightforward. I think when we looked at how we reduced from 9.51 to 6.89, you can see some of the adjustments we made in what was proposed. So the Board of Finance had recommended the use of 500,000 in reserves, and then we did get some updated numbers from our insurance consultant, which is what led to what we've budgeted for. Special education. Can we see a student to teacher ratio, and how do we compare with other districts in our DIRG? Thinking back to Tuesday evening, what we decided to do was create two slides for you. One with our DIRG, because we know we're in a different DIRG now, so it's a little harder to compare ourselves to like districts. So the other slide compares us to the same districts that were utilized when we did the special education audit a couple years back, because they were deemed the most comparable in terms of size, demographics, and whatnot. So I'm going to pull that up, and then if you have any questions, I'll ask Mrs. Oresco to help. I think some of the information that we have here, when you look at the FTEs, you have a ratio here of 12.
Mr. Bedancy, can
Yep.
you just zoom in a little bit?
Yep. I can.
Thank you.
Yep. We have, if you look at it this way, the most favorable ratio because it shows that we have the most teachers. But I want to point out the most important numbers, the far right. It's the percent of special education budget for special ed tuition. I am asked year over year for what is your FTE count? And there's always an assumption that if you're adding FTEs, then you must be spending more money. And I say it year over year. Sometimes adding FTEs saves you money. So that percentage right there shows you that by the added staffing, we're not spending more on outplaced tuition because our staff, we're able to control costs through the contractual bargaining, probably the process. The other piece I think that can skew this data and has to be just accounted for is we don't know the continuum of services in these other towns. And so we know what we have. We have multiple sections of what we call TLC, CLC, and SLC for K2, for 3-5, for middle school, and high school. And so if you were to remove just all the program teachers that have dedicated to programs, and you end up with a far lower number than 88, which then would give you more of a caseload ratio, because we know that the teachers designated to special programs are designated only to the students in those programs. And so for everyone else who's not in a program, the remaining special ed teachers have them as part of their caseload. I think that the takeaway with this slide is just that, more staff doesn't necessarily mean more money, because you can see it right here in front of you. These are the ones that I asked the staff to utilize that were the largest in our DIRG that we could potentially compare with. But again, none of those districts are even close in size to us, so it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison.
But you're normalizing the numbers by ratios, correct?
Correct.
So
Yep.
while the numbers of students is smaller, it's the actual ratio that we're
Yeah.
looking at.
But then it goes to the same concern as the previous slide. What special programs did each of these communities have? And so those will skew the ratios, because sometimes you may have in a smaller town, you may have a program that only has, let's say, 3 kids in it because it's a small town, whereas most of our in-district programs are pretty much close or at capacity. That's why we're continually adding sections. So some of our programs, we haven't added new programs. We've just expanded upon existing programs like we did with SLC last year. Diagnostic Center, can you explain the service, and can we insource this to our team of professionals? So this is, I'm going to let Mrs. Oresco speak to this. She's most familiar with the Farmington Valley Diagnostic Center. This is a cooperative agreement that we've been part of since I've been in Southington, so that's 15 plus years at least. So if you can speak to this, I would appreciate that. Let me enlarge it for you a little bit here.
So when you receive the slides, there's a link to their website that talks about the mission of their program. And we utilize this for students who were looking for answers to questions. So we consider it an evaluation process. So we send students and we ask them to answer questions for us around support students need, interventions that might work, what type of programming would best meet those students' needs, and they do it in their small community of staff. So by being part of the cooperative that oversees this through CREC, we are able to purchase what they call seats in that program. So the value add, if you think about the 200,000 we spend for 3 seats, gives us way more than an out-of-district tuition, and it gives us the opportunity to stabilize a student, regulate them, get the information we need on what the best program is for them, and then hopefully make decisions. So it's a short-term placement for most students. So I just summarized like the staff numbers we would need if we wanted to in-source that program. And Mrs. Mellett works closely with the function and running of that program.
And I was going to say, we are buying 3 memberships, which equals 543 days. That does not mean that we have 3 students at this program for the 543 days. They go, to Amy's point, they go for short-term stays, see what kind of services and needs they have, and then they hopefully can be brought back into the district. So those 500 days are spread over multiple students, and they're in and out of that school. We also, the other regional towns that that participate in this are like Region 10, Avon's in there, Plainville's in there, I believe Farmington's in there. So it's a bunch of school districts like us who have a need for this type of a short-term program, and we all pool our money together by buying the memberships, and then the diagnostic center hires the teachers, and the classrooms there are very small, and they have the services that the students need. So we find it to be a very useful diagnostic center for this district.
And this is actually a type of program that's probably ahead of its time, because this is what the governor is trying to incentivize versus, where you can, if you're a district that's not large enough to start a program like this, to go into cooperatives with other towns and share the cost of it. And so this is a program that's been in existence, but it is shared amongst 10 towns.
Sure.
Mr. Carson?
Yeah. Steve, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Related to the transportation cost to participating in this cooperative?
Sure.
So we provide the transportation, and depending on the sending towns, we may ride share with them, or we have our students on a transportation, often with our district contracts.
And the reason why I asked that, is because anytime, like we see this, with our, special education population specifically, like the cost of the teachers and the programs oftentimes is less than what it actually costs us to get our students to the resources that they need. So, like we look at $200,000, but is it costing us $200,000 to get our students to participate in this cooperative? So I only say that because, if we're able to replicate it within the district, you eliminate those transportation costs.
So I think the one thing the special ed department does very well in terms of ride sharing where they can, but because we're not obligated to use any particular transportation provider for some sort of placement like this, we're only paying for the transportation for the time we're using it. And so it's not like we're transporting 3 kids that might live in 3 different parts of town for 181 days there every day. We may be taking a child from his home to Farmington Valley for 45 days only, and that's the only expense. If there's 2 kids, we could ride share, certainly, if they're both in town to get them there. We're able to use vehicles that aren't always buses either, because there are transportation services that are far cheaper than what the bus company costs. So I think where you see the big transportation numbers is where we end up getting buses that maybe need a monitor, maybe need a lift, maybe are at a highly specialized school that's not in close proximity to us, and it's daily. Those are the ones where you see the really big transportation bills. These don't really ever come nearly that close to the expense that we see with some of the larger, more complex cases.
Okay. I mean, if we do, Mrs. Mellett, if we do have the transportation costs associated with this program, I'd like to see them.
Yeah.
So as I said, that the memberships are not just for one student.
Yeah.
So it would be a matter of looking at all the students that we have in and out through the course of the year. And I will say that they are tracking these students on our out-of-town tuition spreadsheet, which is maintained by the People Services Office, and that's the spreadsheet that we use to report the excess cost students every December 1st. So there are students there with their line and with their transportation. So if they
Okay.
go over the 4.5 times, they are reported on the filing that we submit to the state. So there is a possibility of a reimbursement from that grant. So we could get you that information, like we could pull it from the 24-25 year and give you like what the tuition cost was for the Farmington Valley students and how much we paid for those students in their transportation.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if it's doable, please. You know, I understand it's a little more complex and not as straightforward
Yep.
as, you know,
Yeah.
as some of our other transportation costs to really, you know, like follow the transportation with the student
Yep.
throughout the school year. But I think if it helps us inform a decision
Yep.
on whether we should be looking to bring this in district in the future,
Yep.
I think it's worth it.
We can certainly do that.
Okay.
Mr. Wachowski?
Just a brief question. Not something I need right now, but, I mean, rough calculations, this is more going back to the previous slide that you had on the screen, Mr. Medancy. So, rough numbers, it's about $36,400 to educate each one of those 1,074 special education students based on the budget that's being proposed. Now, in those numbers there, is it feasible to maybe pull the information of what each one of those towns is spending on their special education budget, just to sort of get an idea of, as much as I hate the number, I guess it would make more sense for me because we do compare what we pay on average per student for education. If we could maybe see a little bit more apples to apples as far
Do
as
that.
what they're spending.
Yeah, I can do that.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Camuso?
So, talking about per pupil spending, so when we look at per pupil spending, does that incorporate special ed and regular ed?
When they come up with the state number, that the 19,000 change we talk about is the base number that they use. They don't average it out to, which would essentially increase our per pupil number. They don't use the higher costs that are associated with some students. They use the base aid cost for all students as the same level of services.
Thank you.
While we're doing this, I also just want to thank the staff for reorganizing everything. They did a nice job. I'm going to ask Mrs. Zavalkal to come up and speak to you now, because I'm certainly not going to sit here and try to be the expert on AI for you. Questions were school-based software, AI tools, what are they? What are we doing with this? What is the expected benefit for students and staff? And then, again, similar question, what AI tools in 42,500 is the admin looking to integrate across the district? And so, good questions, and I think questions that every district is asking right now. So, Mrs. Zavalkal? Just make it bigger.
So we've been working, starting in 2024, with mostly at the secondary level to educate our staff on what generative AI is and what it is not, and some of the uses and potential big downfalls of the tools themselves. So that's been limited so far to staff education, and now we know that our students are using them largely without a lot of guidance from us. And so we need to move at the secondary level into helping our students understand how generative AI works and where it is ethically and responsibly useful and where it should not be used. And then we also know that our elementary students are starting to dabble in it. And so we need to begin that same process with our elementary staff so that they can really focus on a digital citizenship model of use and potential pitfalls of AI. So we have a committee of teachers. We have 12 secondary teachers, and 8 elementary teachers that are looking at what is the safest platforms where we can start to expose students to potential uses of AI. Those 2 tools that we focused on right now are Brisk for teaching and Magic School AI. Those are just the ones we've identified right now. There are new tools literally every day that come into our consciousness, so we will continue to explore those opportunities. The reason we need to go down this road is, one, we already know students are using it, and so we need to help them understand what it is, what it can do, what it doesn't do. Prior to 2024, if you looked at any job skills report, the top skills that are being asked for in businesses were things like effective communicator and creative problem solver. For the first time, we're seeing effective use of AI in job embedded tasks. And so it is something that the industry is starting to look for, and we need to be able to graduate our students with those skills.
Mm-hmm. Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
We had talked about this at a policy meeting not that long ago, and it's not just the use of AI, right? It's how do teachers and educators respond to students that are using it, right? And how do you know when a student is using it, and how do you grade a paper that a student may have used AI for? Are any of these tools or the PD that's coming along with them, how does that work? Because the concept of education, right, is going to change pretty dramatically when it's not so much any longer, did you write this paper and how did you get there? It's what is the thinking process that you used and what did you construct in your head to get there? So your paper might be really nice. You may not have written it. How did you get there, though?
Yeah.
What tools are we using for that?
So there's really 2 parts to that. Both of the tools that I mentioned have like closed environments. So what that means is the students would engage in a limited version of AI that is allowed by the teacher. In one of the tools, it tells them just the only thing this can do is help you rewrite. It won't write from scratch. And so then the teacher is able to see what the student prompts the tool to do, what it put in there to start with, so they would effectively know what was drafted by the student and what rewrites were proposed by the AI tool. The other one is embedded in Google Docs, and so it tracks while the student is writing, so we can see if a student accessed ChatGPT instead and pasted a large block of text, the teacher would see an alert for that. So there are some components of that. As far as an AI detection tool, they're just really not very good right now. In fact, ChatGPT had one and they discontinued it because their own tool was so unreliable for detecting its own AI input. So we're moving away from a got you model of, we're gonna identify if you've used it, to student ownership over, what did I produce? What did I ask AI to do? How did it help me? And that the teacher role of facilitation becomes watching the progression of a student's writing piece.
Ms. Camuso?
So this number that's in the budget, it's solely for the tools, the technology itself, where there's nothing around professional services to implement that or to perhaps educate on how to use prompts or anything like that, or PD associated with how to use these tools.
The number you see in the school software budget is just for the tool, the responsibility for providing the professional development. I'm working with that group, that committee of teachers, and we're looking at how we can effectively roll that out then to the staff members in those buildings.
Sorry, one more follow-up question. And so what about the learning? So it is a learning model, like how, is there a plan to, I don't know like what they're going to be learning, but what is the AI tool going to learn and what's the plan for that?
What the AI
is that
tool
part of
will learn about the students?
No, the learning itself. So an AI tool needs to learn, have knowledge in order to work. So how is that part of this as well, like that learning piece?
The AI tool is, both of them are off the same backbone as ChatGPT. And so it
Oh,
uses the training data from ChatGPT. However, both of the tools, we sign agreements that the data that our students put in and that our teachers put in does not go back to the training model. And so we're not assisting in training that model. We're just using it
You're just utilizing.
off the
Okay,
backbone.
great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
This may be too much in the weeds, but I'm wondering, as far as training teachers or the discussion, I would think that one of the pieces would be, how do you get students to think and problem solve separately from AI entirely? Don't assign a research paper on the French Revolution, because they can do it in a minute.
Yes, so one of the pieces that the Office of Curriculum Instruction, so I work both in the technology department and in the CNI office, and one of the things we've talked a lot there is looking at what the learning goals are. What is the lesson? What do we want the students to take away from this? And then how do we write tasks? How do we write projects? How do we write those learning opportunities in a way that either leverages it so that it's a higher order thinking, or it removes it from the equation altogether?
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's here, and we just have to be prepared. We have
I
to prepare our
equate it
kids
to
for
the, I may be dating myself a little bit, when I first started teaching, the internet was new, and we weren't gonna allow people to use it. And we had a website called Ask Jeeves, if you're, I don't remember that, you're really bad. And that's the only site you could go on, because we blocked everything else in the district. And we said, you must use the encyclopedia to cite your work. And we see where that went. So I think at some point, I think to use a phrase that I've heard often, the horse is out of the barn. So we'd be best to teach our students and our staff how to use it appropriately, but then also be conscious of just having students show their work. The old school method sometimes can remove some of that unto itself. So.
But Ms. Savical hit the nail on the head. This is something that is out there with work, too. We want to prepare our students for getting out there, not just
100%.
for school, but for work. So
Yep.
they need to know, and they have to have these basics behind them. This is now a basic.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
So a couple questions further related to technology. Chromebooks and laptops.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Oh, I'm
Carson?
sorry.
Yeah, just before we move on, so, this is, the increase in AI, right, is under budget line item, school-based software.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an increase in that budget line item of $32,724. Is that a one-time increase, or are we gonna see that exponentially, not only year over year, but potentially exponentially increase as we further adopt AI tools within the district?
Yeah, some of our software, we're on, let's say, a 3-year agreement with them, and, or a 5-year agreement, and in some cases like that, that helps us reduce the cost year over year, depending on how long we're willing to, commit to that piece of software. Almost all software passes off some level of increase. We typically try to budget for about 3%, because that's at least what it comes in at. So I would say that number is a number you can anticipate if this is the tool we continue to use. What I would say, though, is what we've done, and Mrs. Savical's done a great job at this, is on the administrative side of our software, we check to see how much the software is being used, not just this software, but all of our software, because we also look for opportunities like if it's not really being used all that much, we shouldn't be renew it for the sake of renewing it, because it's a piece that we've always had. And in some cases, that really gets some staff upset, because it might be that small 10% of staff that love that piece of software and use it. But if 90% are not using it, then, there's areas where we can try to reallocate the funds or find some savings.
Okay, thank you.
Technology, 54,400. The equipment, the Chromebook and laptops, can we phase this in versus doing it all at once? Can you please remind us of the Chromebook replacement schedule, quantity, and who is responsible for replacement of damaged Chromebooks? So I'll go to the replacement piece first, but then we'll talk further about the process of phasing in or the replacement cycle that we're on. Families are responsible for all accidental or intentional damage. We do have insurance that we sell to families for devices, and it started slowly but surely. I think once families realized we were serious, we were going to charge them, and that their kids were not always going to make the best decisions with the device, that there was going to be a bill coming along. So then now it's slowly but surely picked up some traction, and more families would rather just pay that piece of insurance to have that peace of mind. But I will also say the tech department has done a tremendous job at all of our building-based tech staff, and some others have been trained to do a lot of the device repairs here in district on site. We're not sending devices out. We don't have like an outside company or anything that does that for us. So I think we're in a better place. I'd be lying if I told you I'm really happy with the way our middle schoolers treat our devices. It tends to be less of a problem at high school and elementary. I think the middle school students, can sometimes be a little bit of a wild card, so can their use of the device. But that's an area where we continue to really monitor closely with the middle schools. And the administration at both of those schools does a good job supporting us when kids are not handling the devices properly, and it seems to be a recurring pattern with the device. In terms of the device replacement, I know a couple years back, this board, and it was helpful to us, chose to support replacing staff devices with PCs versus Macs. We saw tremendous savings with that shift, and it really helped us too, because it put our user environment in terms of the software we need to protect the network. We still have some Macs in our district because they're not aged out yet with the 5-year cycle, but we're getting there each year a little at a time. So that's an example of something we've done with the staff replacement cycle. But I'd like to let Mr. Savage speak to the device replacement as a whole. He does a tremendous job with this. It's as you can imagine, it's no small feat when you have that many students and that many devices.
One sec. Okay. So yeah, kind of to reiterate what Mr. Medancy said, we have the ability now, since we are PC, to kind of shop around. So I think I speak for Rebecca as well. Like, there's nothing we sign our name to that we haven't gone back a few times and at least asked multiple different vendors. So we work with at least 3 or 4 vendors. We work with 3 or 4 manufacturers just to get the best deal for our staff and students. I do understand they're big numbers, but we always try and make sure that we fine-tooth comb the specs to make sure if there's anything in there that they kind of sneak in, we kind of take it out, like if we don't definitely need it, because we're not a Fortune 500 company, like we're not doing graphic work everywhere. So the teachers mostly need to be on Chrome and things like that. So we try and get them to be able to last 5 years, but not to be over spec'd, where it would cost too much money. So that's like every 5 years they get replaced. When it comes to the Chromebooks, we're still kind of working through that. And the way we have the devices laid out, they get their full life at some point, but they're in a student's hands 1-to-1 for 3 or 4 years, and then they go back to the K-2 level, and they're like classroom sets. So we have the devices in the hands of the older students that are doing the larger testing and more intense things, and then the other devices that are in good shape go back down. Now, as Mr. Bedancy said, a lot of times the ones in the middle school that we get back, they aren't usually able to be reused. We usually use them for parts. So we always are scavenging when we can, and if they break a screen, we'll take the keyboard, and before we recycle, we always take everything we can reuse. And thankfully with Chromebooks, the screens kind of all match, so no matter what model we have, they're able to be used. So another thing on here is that the staff desktops, or the student desktops for labs. So every year we relook at, do we need these labs? So currently, we only have labs that require it because of the software. And unfortunately, the Chromebooks just haven't gotten there yet. So basically, at this time, we're leaving these, I think, 12 labs roughly, because they do Inventor or CDCAD, things like that. So they require a graphic processor. There are things coming from Chromebooks and that might be able to do it, but we're still not there yet. And those are on like a 7-year plan, because we can get desktops at a little cheaper cost with better specs. This year we were able to reduce 2 labs, but unfortunately or fortunately, they were Perkins funded, so it doesn't lower this number, but it at least takes them out of the Perkins grant, so we can spend that on other things. Any questions?
Anybody? You had mentioned like parts, the middle school computers coming back in the non, are those replaceable with the insurance? So
So
we
yeah,
get a new one and you get to farm for parts?
yeah, so with the insurance, the cost that it is to the parent or the student, we try and prorate that, like at the age of the device. Like, as you know, like we're not gonna make them pay for a brand new device if it's 3 or 4 years old. But yeah, so when those parts do come back, we're able to use them. We also buy our replacement parts and any other ancillary Chromebooks, because like some need to be, like if a Chromebook that might be here, like that isn't really 100% in the budget. It would be used by one of those ones we get back, those ones that go down to the K-2. So we kind of shuffle those things around, and we're always kind of aware of where they're going to go and where they best fit. But we do utilize that funding that is from like the self-insurance from the students to purchase parts and also some other devices.
Thank you.
Do students have to pay for a Chromebook if they've broken it or whatever?
Yeah, so if they have the insurance, I don't know 100% by heart, but I'm pretty sure they get one accidental damage. Obviously, if there's intent, we always look for that. The techs do a great job of going through each one, taking photos, because the parents, of course, when they get a bill, they want to be like, hey, why do I have this large bill? So we always, and Rebecca does a lot of that too, Ms. Savicle, dealing with the parents and saying, this is why we had to do X, Y, or Z, and this is why you're being charged this. It's all in the policy, the amount that things are worth, like a keyboard or a screen or the whole device. So they are responsible for that. And the admins do assist us, as Mr. Bedancy said, to kind of make sure that we get everything back as we should. Like in high school, they won't be able to walk, if things like that happen, or in the middle schools, they won't be able to go on the school trips. But obviously, we take into account hardships and things like that as well. But it's definitely, we just want the kids to be accountable, and it's helped a lot. Also, putting cases on the devices has helped a lot of the external damage that causes the internal damage.
Ms. Camuso?
Thank you.
So I might have missed this, but do you have any type of agreement with the vendor when they're purchased for recycle, replace?
So that has kind of backfired in the past. So right now we kind of purchase and we do the best we can to go through and vet all that out and get the best deal for the best working Chromebook and the best specs. And then at the end of it, we have another company that we recycle with. Unfortunately, sometimes when you do it with the large companies, they kind of are ticky-tacky about it, I guess you could say, like this had scratches on it or this had this and that. So sometimes they're a little more strict versus other companies that we've had a better success rate of getting more funding back from them.
Thank you.
Mr. Carson?
Tyler, I see that, the rationale in the budget here, we're purchasing roughly 1,575 Chromebooks. That's the year-over-year quantity of Chromebooks that the district purchases?
Yeah, so we have a total of like 6,000 students, but we also have some, like I said, the shared ones. We have about 250 staff members that are utilizing Chromebooks. So we would be purchasing the classes, and in that case, it's 175, or the 1575 is 3 grade levels, and a fifth of this teaching Chromebooks. So then when we get those back, those 1,575, we pick the best we can and bring them down to the K2, but that would be a year over process.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Savage.
One other thing, I wanted to go back to the extreme from last week. Let me see if I can. I thought of one thing I wanted to mention. So also, in addition to the right to use the extreme licenses and the extreme access points, this also is largely beneficial in us getting the students off the network for Wi-Fi, getting their personal devices off the network. Because with the cloud setup, we're able to, on the fly, change passwords. So like if we have a guest password that's for an outside coach that's coming in or something like that, we let them use it for the weekend or the robotics team. Sometimes the students get it, and then on Monday, they're all using it. Yeah. So with the cloud, we're able to go right in the cloud and change it, and then they're unable to log in anymore. So that's been very beneficial for us to keep their personal devices off the network, also for security. And then another thing is that also provides us with very quick turnaround on support. So if something were to break, we are able to replace it at a very quick rate because of that and keep everything up and running. But yeah, sorry to go back to that, but I wanted to just mention that.
Thank you. That's the key to cell phone bans, just locked on your network. All right. Dues and memberships. Can we get an explanation of what each of these are and the benefit that they provide to the district? And we have them here, CABE, the Connecticut Association of Schools, CAPS, and then anything that's much smaller. But these are the primary ones in that line item. I think you all know from each perspective, CAS is really a partner in terms of the amount of program they offer for staff, but also what they do for the student organizations. The CAPS, for me, is without them, I'd be a little bit lost there. That's my main public advocacy group in terms of when legislative work is coming down the pike and work that we're doing, with the district, and also my membership for professional support. And then CABE, which is that's a cost that I think we've been members of CABE since I've been in district. Can we look to hire a full-time grant writer to make sure we take full advantage? We looked into this a few years back, and I think what's happened is one of the things that we learned, even having an hourly grant writer, which we currently have, and it's on per diem, so we can engage them whenever we want and only pay them for the time that we use them. And she does a good job, but the challenge we have is what we've learned. Most of the grants that are put out there right now are community wealth-based. And so they're competitive grants, and you usually have to have a certain demographic, whether it's a level of income, free reduced lunch rate, poverty rate, things like that. So we compete for state grants often and are never awarded those grants. The grants that we do get are the entitlement grants, which are year over year that they're required to give us, and so that's helpful. Like excess cost grant, they're supposed to give that to you. That you don't have to apply for that. With that said, they don't even fund that at the levels that they need to. But we also use them for the Family Resource Center uses them to do grant writing, and it has been successful. And we have had her apply for grants that we've tried, even for small project like the Lowe's grant, to help with some of the stuff for Ag Sci or community gardens and things. And it's so hit or miss if you get them or if you don't. A Lowe's grant for $5,000, you've got 1,500 schools across the country applying for it. So it better be a pretty special grant application to get the 5,000. So that's kind of the challenge right now. I think grants are becoming harder and harder to come by because the criteria is becoming not conducive to a community like Southington when they're competitive. The rubbish removal, we have a slide for that, but I think this would probably come back to people's memory quick. It was the end of the year. We went out to RFP for the trash removal contract, and I was once taught not to ask questions you don't want the answers to, so we went out to bid and we got our answer. And so this is rather small, but I think Mrs. Mellett can just speak to it in general terms because this is fresh in her head. It's very recent.
Yes, our previous trash vendor was HQ, and over the course of the last year and a half or so, they were bought out by CWPM. When we went out to bid, to Steve's point, we found that the service that HQ had been providing to us had favorable rates to us. They were a town vendor, and they wanted to make sure that the town and the Board of Ed were successful. So that's basically what we found when we went out. And just the question had said, could we court other contractors? So we just wanted to put this slide up to refresh memories that we did ask. We did bid it, and we received 4 bids, and the budget that you're looking at is with the lowest responsible bidder there, the CWPM.
Thank you, Mrs. Mellett. What is the length of the copier repair contract? So that's actually expiring at the end of this school year, June 2026. So that'll come to, there's always a choice. Again, it goes back to almost like the rubbish removal. Sometimes your current contract will say the minimal increase if you just extend us, or we can say we'll go out to bid, but then it's a little bit of a crapshoot, as you know. It goes back to the old analogy of don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. Once you go out to RFP and the bids are open, then that's the price you're living with when you could have potentially extended and locked in at a less of an increase. So That'll be coming to the finance committee, I'm guessing, at some point, once we decide whether to extend a contract or go out to bid.
Mr. Carson?
What's the conversation amongst the administration about the need and use of copiers within our schools? Obviously, you know, at the elementary level, early education, you know, we still use, you know, paperback books and worksheets.
So I can speak to that for you fairly easily. So, you know, one of the things that Tyler and his team did when he came into district is we removed all printers that were in the district that were not networked, because not only was it paper, it was ink, toner, cartridges, that kind of stuff. They were also difficult to service by our techs, because every machine we were looking at was different. And so we standardized them. They're on the network. Teachers have badges. I don't have mine on, but they all have badges that, you know, when they get to the copy machine, that releases the job. So it cuts down on errant printing. You know, like printed that, oh, I didn't need it. You know, sometimes you may not realize it, but you go to the printer with your badge. We have a copy center here, right out inside this door, in a ginormous machine that any bulk copying that needs to be done is done there, so that we're not utilizing the smaller printers when we don't need to. And most of the printers are centrally located, whether it's in the main office or the library, a copier, so that we can monitor the usage. There's, you know, students are generally in the middle school and high school are on Canvas or Google Classroom, so the online classroom platform allows them to submit lessons online. But in many cases, there's still a need to printing. You know, I always tell people I'm a Patriots fan. Robert Kraft actually made his money off of paper, because right when computers were invented, kind of ironic, you know. So, but we do our best to manage the amount of printing that we do and restrict the amount of access to the printer so that it's not abused and we can keep those costs low. Because not only is the printer cost, there's paper costs. Any savings in making outright purchases of items that we currently rent? I'll let Mrs. Mellett speak to this.
Sure, we just noted here that we lease copiers, and we have Pitney Bowes mail machines, one here and one at the high school. Leasing the equipment is a better way for schools to manage their budgets. You can imagine if we had to go out and buy, you know, 50 new copiers, that would be a huge expense to be happening in 1 year. So by signing a 5-year agreement for the copiers, we're able to spread those payments over the 5-year period. So we feel like the way that we're doing it is the best for our budget. If you win the lottery, maybe we can do
Yeah.
something
And
different.
even if we went on a copy replacement cycle, since we own them, if they break, then we're still paying companies to come and do service calls. And if you're not on a lease agreement and you're just coming out as a cold call to a company to service a machine, it's far more expensive than if it's built into a maintenance agreement.
It also helps us keep current with the technology. You know, Tyler deals with the network security and making sure that the copiers have the correct updates and the security in their software.
Just-
Adult ed, can we get
Just-
more detail? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry for the interruption. Just one more question. The number of units that we currently have in the district, I'm hoping that it's not 50?
I'm sure it's more than 50.
Yes.
Do we have a number?
Oh, I'm sure I do upstairs, yeah. I don't
Okay.
have it available. But if
They're
you
all under
think about-
contract till June, so if you're looking to reduce it, we can revisit that when the contract comes due.
Perfect.
And I think if you spoke to one of the high school teachers, you know, they only have certain breaks during their day, so they're able to go around to the different copiers, and the copiers are purchased or arranged based on the volume that's expected at those locations. So for example, the teacher classroom or the teacher staff room has a high functioning machine because there's a lot of people, a lot of volume, but there might be something like down in the basement by the, which health offices maybe are down there, that doesn't need a large machine, so they have a smaller machine. So yes, we have many machines, but they're all different sizes, and we look at the volume that they're doing when we're doing the renewals.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I imagine at some of our larger schools with more staff, right, and more students, that there's going to be a need for multiple machines. I would just like to be as responsible as possible because that budget item is a big number. You know, for, you know, essentially what we're using the equipment for, right? I would rather, even if it's not to achieve cost savings, I would rather have that money spent somewhere else. Like, give it to Tyler, you know, let him do something with, you know, Chromebooks and networks and what have you. I would rather not spend that money on copiers and printing.
So
paper.
again, we're June 2026. We'll continue that conversation.
Tyler liked that, by the way.
He's nodding, yes, just give me the money.
Mikey liked
Can we get more detail regarding the adult education? Reference number 8114, I'm sorry, 8141-8. This is actually a move that we made that was a tremendous move a few years back. I think I was still assistant superintendent, but we struggled with adult education, both in enrollment and staffing, and the cost that was being passed on to people that were trying to take some of the courses. The grant funding that we got from the state is limited. It was about $35,000 a year, and it cost far more than that to run it. We were approached for years about starting a cooperative because another town said, you know, we have the same problem, but if we share services, and the state, again, in that instance, was encouraging that. And so that's when we entered into the cooperative with Bristol. So they actually fund a lot of it. Most of our funding comes from the small amount that you see there, but also that we give them our whole portion of the state grant, which I don't even think it was $35,000 last year. It's,
No, I think it's about 20, it's
Yeah.
actually in the grant section.
yeah, okay. So it's a cooperative essentially that I think we are benefiting from, both in terms of access to courses. They're able to offer more because it's a bigger program than when we had like 4 staff members. They do offer courses here in Wallingford, though. They use the Karen Smith Academy.
In Southington?
Southington.
Oh, did I say Wallingford?
You did, but I knew
Sorry.
what you meant.
Yeah. Maybe I'm thinking about being home at some point tonight. Sorry.
So the adult ed state grant is $16,318 this year. It's very small.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
$16,318. And last year it was $22,290, so it went down.
It's kind of weird. Everything goes up, those go down. It's strange.
Yeah. And adult ed is mandated by the state. We have to have.
Ms. Camuso?
So then, are all of the educational programs at that location in Bristol, Redstone?
They can take, residents can take, both Bristol residents can take class in Southington, Southington residents can take class in Bristol.
So some of that funding does go for courses that are happening in
Yes.
Southington?
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Miscellaneous, major drivers. I'll let Mrs. Mellett speak to this.
Sure, these are, the page 4 that you were looking at was the major drivers, so we were trying to identify the biggest changes. There's 53 other accounts that have small changes in the book that are netted into that $170,000. So what you're seeing on page 4 are the big drivers. Every account in every section shows you what the increase, decrease is in the far right-hand column. So if you added all of those up that are not specifically mentioned on page 4, you would get the 170. So there's nothing significant in there, but it's a culmination of the 53 accounts that aren't on there. I did it the other day, so.
Can we put 2 teachers back in the budget from Nexus rather than 4? So just as a refresher for people what Nexus is the, essentially the billable support that we provide to students that might be attending Southington schools that don't reside in Southington to the district that they reside in. So our challenge every year is we don't know what we're going to be billing year over year. So a little bit of living on danger in terms of budgeting for a number that you may or may not actually bill for. We have, each year we've proposed this, and each year it's gone back to Nexus. But if we were able to do 2 instead of 4, I think even that would be a step in the right direction. Follow-up questions from Tuesday. What year of our agreement with Noresco are we in? Would you be able to send an annual report? So we have linked that report. I read it today. I did like what some would call in school a close read. And, well, no, that's not, that's a different slide. Let's see. No, that slide is a different link, but we do have the annual report, and we'll link it in for you. It was last year. The last report we have was the year 9 report. So we're going to be getting the next report would obviously be the year 10 report. We're on this till 2030. So it's not a 20-year agreement, which is good. It's a 15. It's the report itself doesn't do a good job at teasing out the savings unique to Southington and the town in terms of quantifying dollars. It does break out, the district buildings against the town buildings and kilowatt usage and, some of the projected and estimated savings that come with each. So that is linked for your pleasure reading. What would figures look like to hire 1 to 2 FTE for mowing?
I did just link the Noresco to the correct
Okay,
document.
thank you. So we put together a kind of what would a business plan look like, and I would let Mr. Romano speak to this.
Good evening. So I reached out to a couple of the vendors that we work with that are currently doing our lawn mowing and just asked them some basic questions about how many staff they would bring into each school and how long it would take to mow. So that's how we come up with the total number of hours that it would take, which is like 84 hours. Obviously, then you have, things that come up, whether it's weather or whatever. So we added another 10% contingency to that. So you're at 92 hours. So you really need to have 2.5 people in order to complete it. So working with Mrs. Millette, we came up with what the cost is for staffing and estimating for truck, the mower, weed whackers, trailer, gas and oil, and then through a contingency on that, again, just to be safe because we're our budgeting. And it comes up with a cost to do that. It would be $333,000. We currently have $129,000 in this year's budget for this work. So, our first year expense would be $204,000 over what we're doing for subcontractor. Really wanted to make this work. After the first year, obviously with the equipment investment, it drops to only $80,000 over our budgeting. But so still, instead of spending $130,000, we're looking at spending $210,000. I was looking for any opportunity to make this work because I keep asking for more laborers. And if I said, here, these guys are really for 5 months, but then I would have them for 7 other months, I still, no matter what I did, the numbers just were too far out to try and make it where it'd be palatable to ask you to please consider it. Any questions?
Just a comment.
Sure.
I actually think your mowers.
Yeah.
Thought was a little bit low. I think that's about $30,000 per mower now.
Yeah, that is what it is $30,000
Oh,
per
gotcha.
mower.
Oh, okay,
So the
yeah.
two of them come to 60. So
Gotcha, yeah.
we're spot on, Joe.
They're expensive as heck. They're a car.
Yeah. It's a big investment. You have to have the truck. You have to have an enclosed trailer,
Yep.
because they're going to be sitting in the maintenance parking lot all the time.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. It's a nice, but I can't imagine you're going to want to do this.
Well, I just love the contingencies too, where it's, I remember back when I was doing it, it's, a belt breaks.
Yeah.
You're down
Yeah.
and you're in the middle of a field trying to fix a mower and
Yep.
2.5 hours later, it's getting dark out, so.
Yeah, and you can't just have one mower because it breaks. Then then what are you going to do? Lose a week?
You need
Or,
redundancy.
Yeah.
100%.
So.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for the follow-up.
Yep.
Can we look back at the last 3 budget years, budget cycles of insurance? So we have that information for you, along with some supporting information, but I'll let Mrs. Mellett speak to this.
Sure. I went back 3 years. What you're looking at now is the total self-insurance budget that's the combined town and Board of Ed. And you can see those increases year after year. The self-insurance committee, when it was the leader on this group, they would come up with the insurance budget based on the current year claims, and then they would evaluate whether there was an opportunity to use some of the self-insurance reserve fund to reduce what was being asked for new deposits into the self-insurance fund. So you'll see the total use of the reserves on the white line there. So we went from $1.4 million use of reserves in 24-25 down to $1.255 million in 25-26 that we're currently in. And I highlighted the $500,000 right now because we're still early in the budget season as far as the historical development of the self-insurance budget goes. In the past, we would have at least a January, February, and probably March opportunity to look at additional use of reserves and/or what the current claims are, so that that top number may also be adjusted based on what they were seeing, based on the current claims being paid, the actual claims. And then this down here is the Board of Ed's 74% of that budget. And keep in mind that this budget is after we take into account the employee contributions. The active employees have a cost share based on their union contracts. So that varies from, I think it's 12.5% maybe for the paras, 13.5% for the para educator contract, up to 23% for the administrators. And included in that also is the school lunch department is considered as part of the self-insurance world. They're considered as part of Board of Ed, but 100% of their cost and the employer and the employee cost comes from the food service operations. So they're paying in, then also the retirees. All the retirees pay 100% of the premium due with no cost share. So they're paying 100%. So there's no cost to the district. So when you take the towns, 74% of the town's budget, you're not going to see that number in our budget because we reduce our budget by the employee contributions, the retiree contributions, and the food service contributions. So what you're seeing here is the net of all of those payments, and that's what will be coming from the Board of Ed operating budget.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for compiling that.
Could you provide more clarification about the deliverables of hiring a social worker? Does the police department fund social workers? What are the regulations and funding requirements for hiring social workers? So I followed up with Lieutenant Armack today, just in terms of what, where is there a place or how does it work in terms of conjunction with the police department relative to community needs? And he said that, they're trained in crisis intervention, not all officers, but they're continuing to train them and train more of them as they can. Their job really is to stop or control the problem, but not to fix the problem. And so in a crisis, they can go in and address the situation, but then the bridge is far beyond that in terms of their role. We wanted to talk a little bit more, not so much about the police department role with social workers, but I think as we, debriefed the following day, there was a lot more I think that we wish we had shared that we wanted to share with you tonight to help, bring that conversation forward. So with that said, I'll have Mr. Pepe and Mrs. Oresco speak to it.
Sure, thank you. So one thing we implemented this year is we called it a day in the life survey because it is hard to quantify the day of a social worker amongst other related service staff. So I asked them to, last Thursday, tell me what percentage of their day fell into these tasks. So after talking to Mr. Pepe, this really does show you what their day breakdown looks like. So this is the reported from the social workers that worked last Thursday. So it talks about their time with students, their time consulting with staff. We had them talk about the other pieces of their day, if they're working on IEP goals and objectives, if they're doing any referrals to community services, if they're meeting with teachers, if they're contacting parents. So this graphic represents last Thursday.
I think if you look at the snapshot, the piece we were worried most about in terms of what caught the conversation was the community component and the partnership. And here, in terms of outside agency, parental support and whatnot, it was 3.3% of their day. The direct service to students, some of the reporting requirements. Our social workers, another portion to this. In order to provide services under IDEA for social work, you need to be certified by the state, which is our social workers pay into the teacher's retirement system. They don't pay into they wouldn't be paying into I think it's the MERS that the Southington police pay into. So it is a whole separate certification because it really is a separate skill set relative to a social worker who's out community-based. That community-based person doesn't necessarily require a state school certification.
Mr. Carson?
Steve, can I just ask a quick question about the paperwork requirements? What reports or paperwork are social workers preparing, and where are they submitting it?
So when we have planned parent meetings, they're called IEP meetings or 504 meetings, they have to be preparing reports out in terms of the student progress on, let's say, the social skills goals that are within the individualized education plan. Sometimes in the 504, writing up the plan after meeting with the family in terms of what accommodations need to be provided. We do a lot of tracking with Medicaid, and we try to recoup some of the cost to the district for that. So where families give us permission, it is something that we start every meeting with, that we authorize them to allow us to collect a portion of Medicaid that we're eligible for providing those services. They spend time tracking all of that for all students. I think we have, for students, we have some grief groups. We've had students that have lost parents. We have students that are struggling, let's say, with family crises or divorce. We have students that have just endured trauma. And all of those, situations, they bring that into school with them. And so when we talk about student meeting, that 33.2, that's what I call boots on the ground. That's where they are regularly working with students that have that need and that for support. We had a scenario actually happen yesterday that, I don't know if we have a slide for it, but I think anecdotally. It was linked. Was it linked? Okay. Oh, it's on the same one? So this was just yesterday, and this is just kind of speaks to, you don't always get to control what you bring into school with you. So.
And situations like that happen often and are not captured within the pie chart that you see. These are the walk-ins that just occur.
No, and that's fantastic. Do we have a number of these instances
Yes.
that we can?
So I track, along with Mrs. Oresco and Ms. DeSenza, we track all DCF referrals, all 211 calls, all 911 calls, all restraints and seclusions, all time that crisis intervention teams have to be mobilized at the school level or at the individual level, depending on the situation that we're dealing with. Chronic absenteeism and truancy, those are all things that involve the social worker in some way, shape, or form. They're either on the crisis team, they're doing home visits, they're mandated reporters. Students in crisis, especially in elementary, if they have a relationship with that social worker, sometimes they're sharing, and all the DCF reports get sent to my office. I have at least one, but usually about 3 every day from across our district. And what kids will often share that they're dealing with that maybe happened over the weekend. Not always in the direct household, sometimes extended family or, split families or whatnot, but it's, they're bringing a lot with them. And so I think, there's some people think that this is a manufactured need, and I couldn't disagree more. I've seen the need visibly every day. Mr. Pepe and I are constantly fielding calls from our school administrators, just giving us a heads up if there's a situation where there's a child in crisis. I know we notify the board every time there's an ambulance or emergency dispatch called for a child in crisis, whether it's emotional or physical regulation. So it's a need that I can't emphasize enough.
Right. just think it would really help the board, you know, to quantify it, right? Because, you know, it's a position and an area where it's maybe difficult to quantify based on, you know, the cost to the district. And so if we can say that a social worker in Southington, in our school system, handles, let's just say 300 cases or instances a year, well, then that really helps us, you know, make a financial decision, you know, that makes fiscal sense.
So we have that number for you here. So in 24-25, and when we say recorded incidents, this kind of covers the gamut of what I told you. This does not cover the daily responsibilities. So like the report writing, the meeting with students in groups, that kind of stuff. So 911 calls, a critical response, a person only, which would be often the social worker or the whole team. The MCIS, which is the mobile crisis, the referrals to DCF, the referrals to our district behavior team, which are students who sometimes are often exceeding the capacity of what a school thinks they can do or have tried, so that we bring in and we have clinical support on that team. Truancy referrals, UCC, risk assessment, and threat assessment. In 24-25, it was 595 of those incidents across the district. The recorded by just the social worker, it was 207. And that's across the district. Right now, this year, we're already at 349 halfway through the year, so it's potentially that would double. So we're looking at roughly 700. So it is climbing, and then 102 just by the social worker right now. In addition to that, where we meet kids just incidentally, but we want to document the need or the concern, we do what's called log entries. 29% of all log entries in the district, and that's between psychs, that's between school counselors, school administrators, front office staff, and social workers. 29% of all of our log entries in the district are done just by the social workers. So it just shows how much information documenting, you know, and communicating they need to do.
So the first two numbers that Mr. Venanzi shared was the 595, the total amount of all of those types of incidents. And it was 207.
Yeah.
The 207, the social work took the lead. The 595, the 207 is part of that 595. It's not to say that the social worker wasn't part of the balance of the 207 that makes that 595. So they're a representative sample of a strong, significant sample of 35% that they were leading in those types of crises.
Okay, is it possible that that 595 number does not include a social worker?
Well, so you would back out the 207 first?
Yep, correct.
And the balance, it is
It may or may not
possible that
have,
there's
yeah.
a
May or may
percentage
not.
that the may or may
Okay.
not.
All right.
Ms. Camuso?
Yeah, just a quick question. So numbers are one thing, but like if you have a student, right, a child that needs a social worker and there's an incident, is this same social worker going to be assigned to that student and follow that student
Yes.
through the year?
Yes.
You know, it's not a one-time thing, right?
Correct.
These numbers are, you know, they're great to hear, but
Yeah.
I think it's about also the support of the child throughout the entirety of the year or even beyond?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And that's where we try the best that we can, because our social workers have done a good job building relationships with the students and the families to not move social workers around. But I think, as you heard from the presentation, we have some part-time folks that we have no choice, so they're split between schools. They might be half-time at Daranoski and half-time at South End, you know. And so even there, because you can't schedule a crisis, right? It may be times when they're not there. So at that point, that adult doesn't, and that's been a challenge. We've acknowledged that social worker that student has a relationship with and who probably would best respond to in that moment isn't there. So then it might be the psych or the principal, or, you know, we don't have any school counselors at the elementary. And so they will definitely respond to the person they have the closest relationship with, and usually that's the social worker.
And just a point of clarification, if I can, the social worker, although is represented, and this is Oresco's request, the request came from your site level administration. Because they are the ones who are responding to the crises, and typically the social worker and psych are with them. And one of the biggest challenges at the elementary level, again, is if you have a 0.5, and at the time of the crisis, your 0.5 is somewhere else. That's why the request came from the site level administration through
Mrs. Carmody?
Mrs. Oresco.
Sean, if you could look at me for a minute, Sean, I would like to say something to you. As a teacher, former teacher, depending on the day of the week, depending on the time of the year, in your classroom, you could not predict these crises that would happen with students. You just can't predict it. And it would be very difficult. An experienced teacher could probably deal with it, but they would have to call for extra help because the kids just could go off. And I wouldn't know how to deal with a kid that was going through severe anxiety or social problems. Therefore, having a social worker in the school that we could depend on a daily basis, and it could happen on a Monday, and then Friday could be wonderful. We need them in our schools, and more so today than ever.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. So going back to, I think there was no more slides with that.
Correct.
Okay. So these are some open items. I know that finishes out the grid for us, but these are some open items that Mrs. Mellett wanted to just kind of put on your radar as we continue to navigate through the budget process. One just small note, I did hear back from the town manager's office. The latest we can give them our budget is February 6th. So we think February 5th is a good time for the budget, a special meeting to kind of finalize our budget, which is kind of what we did last year. We did it on the Thursday, which was the day after the governor's budget. And then into Friday, we submitted our adopted budget to the town so that the town manager could finalize his budget. Okay? So I just want to throw that date out just as a can't work, February 5th?
We'll look at dates.
Okay, all right.
Sure, and then I just said, I already mentioned it once, but there are other opportunities for the self-insurance budget to be adjusted, I guess by the Board of Finance now, either through a use of reserve or through a change in the claims history they're currently seeing. And then the MERS percent, that's the Municipal Employees Retirement Fund for the hourly secretaries, paras, custodians, anybody who's not certified. The teachers don't participate in the MERS. They used to print a projected rate that we used to use for our budget, but they haven't done that the last few years because of recent developments. So last year we received our actual rate for the new year on January 31st. So I'm hopeful that we'll get it. I put there that the budget that you're looking at now is using a rate of 17.21% to calculate the MERS. So hopefully we'll be able to get that before the February 5th meeting. And then same
If
thing.
we're not sure it's February, I only threw that out to say that that's when the town manager,
Okay.
February 6th was his date. I think we have to pull the board for their availability. I threw out the 6th really as the date, given that or the 5th, given that the governor's the 4th and the town manager's the 6th, but we have to pull for availability.
Sure. And again, the 17.21 could be adjusted up or down. So if it is adjusted up, we would have to increase what's in our current budget. I'm hoping that it goes the other way. And then the oil, we buy $45,000, 45,000 gallons of heating fuel, and that contract is not yet locked in. So those are the three open items.
When does that get
Mrs.
locked
Clark?
in?
Is the governor, I know this is the middle of the budget, the biennial budget, so is he expected to make an announcement about nothing prior to or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would be
anything from March?
speculating, but what I'm hearing, and I hope it comes
Yeah.
to fruition, is that there's potentially a push to do something with the education cost share revenue and that potentially consider an escalator, which I've talked to this board about. That may be too big of an ask in a biannual budget year. They might be like, that's too big of an adjustment, so, yeah, we'll pass it, but it's gonna be next year. That's the only thing that I think would have a financial impact that I know of at this point.
And then Ms. Camuso was asking when the fuel would be locked in. I get a daily rate update, so we're just kind of watching it bounce up and down. And right now, all the rates are lower than our current budget, so it would be a small reduction. And it's not a big line, but
Thank you.
I just want to take a minute to thank the administrators that came tonight. We never know when we're going to need you, so those who stepped in when we needed you, and those who, I'm sorry we didn't need you, but I thank you for being here and supporting the budget process.
Thank you. Mrs. Mellett, I just have a question for you. How many budget lines are in the budget?
53 plus all the ones on page 4.
A lot.
Thank you.
All right, so this was, I think we got a lot of information, and I just want to say thank you again to Mr. Medancy, Ms. Mellett, Mr. Fickle, and the entire administrative team, Mr. Pepe, and all of you that put this data together. I know from where it started to where it ended, there was a lot of work that went into it. We had a lot of good debate over the last couple days. There's going to be more discussion at our next board meeting, and then we'll set up a date to have a final discussion and a vote. I think the more information as it continues to come, if you start hearing things, please let us know if there's any data that starts coming through. But thank you all. I think these were very good questions and a lot of information, so a lot of thinking to do now. So, but you guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank